Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. I appreciate you joining me here for another week. Before I get into today's topic, please make sure that you are subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. Apple, Spotify, Google, you will be able to find the podcast on all those fantastic platforms. So by you subscribing and also sharing it around with any friends who you think might get some value from it, you will help me continue to grow the podcast as it has grown fantastically over the last 2 years, and I appreciate you for doing those little things for me. You can also find the video version of this on YouTube, so jump on there and give us a subscribe, give us a like, and do all the clicky things on the internet to help feed the algorithms, continue to grow the podcast. Find us on the socials as well at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram and The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. Now, this week, bit of a quicker episode, hopefully this week, depending on how much I get on my high horsing. The thing I wanted to cover off is the longer you leave it, the more you'll pay for it. And there's, at the time of recording this episode, it is Black Friday, and everyone's doing a Black Friday sale. No, those of you that are wondering if I'm doing one, I'm not going to do one. My coaching is my coaching. It takes the same amount of time. I coach, and the way I do things, it's all tailored. It's all individualized to the people that I coach. And my time is my time, and it is valuable, and my experience is something that I pride myself on. So no, I am not doing a Black Friday sale. But one thing that I've noticed with anything in life is the longer you leave it for and the more you put it off, the more you're going to pay for it. And that doesn't matter whether it's financially. Everything goes up over time. If you just look at the last 10 years, how much things cost, even the last 12 months, right? Like the exponential rate at which the cost of living has grown in Australia. I know those of you that are living in other countries, it may be different, but I know in Australia is phenomenal. So even from the point of view of investing in something, so let's say you're investing in a course or you're doing a course, like if you put it off and you keep putting it off for 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, like it's going to cost more than it would if you just committed to doing it right at the start. It's just the way of the world. That's the way it works for the time being, right? Unless we have a complete meltdown, then things might change. Real estate, you want to buy real estate, it's going to cost you more over time. Even though it might dip at different periods, overall it's going to go up. It's the same with the stock market. Not that I'm an expert, but outside looking in, everything goes up over time and it's going to cost you more. So that hesitancy is going to cost you more. And then when it comes to things like physical training, right? Like I've come across a lot of people who have had pre-existing injuries that they've dealt with for a long time, some of them for decades. And then when we start working together and we get a bit of a roll on and they build consistency and they're able to start seeing some payoff from actually doing some physical activity, a lot of them will come to me with the line, I wish I had have met you earlier, or I wish I had have started earlier. And it's a really common thing to hear when we're doing the right things with somebody because they've seen a massive benefit from it and it's something that's been plaguing them for a good while. And then all of a sudden they're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel, which maybe they haven't seen for a while. And the problem with a lot of them when we actually start to drill down to what stopped them from taking action in the past, it was really a lot of superficial stuff. They were scared to, if it was injury's a little bit different, but let's say if it was an injury, they were scared that they were going to re-hurt themselves. They had bad experiences when they had tried to start doing some form of physical training again, so they didn't want to re-injure themselves because it affects every area of their life, especially when it's quite a severe injury. They didn't want to invest in something financially and not see a benefit from it. But there are all these things that stop people from a fear perspective as to actually starting something right now. But then when we flipped it and when they are on the other side of it and we're like, if you knew what you knew now back then, would have you started earlier? And they're like 100%. But we don't, hindsight's always 20/20, and we don't have a crystal ball, and we don't know that things are always going to work out. But I've spoke on the podcast before, and a really common thing that I speak to people about is like action tends to solve a lot of things. And if we don't take action in our lives right now, and we don't do something, we are going to pay for it in the long term. It can be financially, it can be with, if it's something like training, or maybe it's business. If we don't take action on something we know we need to do now, later on we may have to invest more time into doing it. So by saying you don't have time to do it now, the time you have to invest into it, the longer you leave it, is actually going to be greater. So it negates that argument. The effort we're going to have to put in when we actually get around to it may be a higher level of effort. If it comes to things like training, right, and getting strong and laying that foundation, if you don't train in your 20s and 30s, even your 40s, and you leave it till you're in your 50s, the effort that you are going to have to put in to do it is going to be exponentially more than if you had have started younger. And the time will probably be more as well too, because in order to see a result, you're going to have to put in more work to get the same result that you would have been able to put in less time to get. Hopefully that sentence makes sense. So essentially, if you had have started in your 20s, because you are able to recover quicker, there is a higher output that you are able to put into the work. You may have to only put in 3 hours at that point, but then when you're doing it in your late 40s or your 50s, you may actually have to put in 6, 9, 12 hours to get the same result as what you would in the 3 earlier on. But then you've also got the byproduct of the base that you've built over that extended period, that it just can't be built later on. There are certain things that if you leave it too long, you're just not going to be able to get there. Putting it off till tomorrow can really bite you in the ass when it comes to things like physical training and physical preparation, because once we get older, yes, our bodies do start to deteriorate. Unfortunately, Father Time for all of us is completely undefeated, but by the earlier we start, the better foundation we can lay, and the more we can prolong certain aging effects that are going to happen to us. The loss of muscle mass for men, like the decrease in testosterone, like all these things are going to be tied into how physically fit you are. And if you just keep putting it off and you're just like, I'm going to get time later on as I get older, and then all of a sudden you hit 50 and you haven't really done anything and your hand is forced to do something, there is going to be a time cost, there is going to be an effort cost, and there is also going to be a health cost that you are going to have to pay at that point for leaving it. And then on top of that, let's say you don't ever get around to it, and let's say you're never able to get around to it. The biggest thing that is going to cost you whenever you put anything off is the cost of regret. And that is something that it plays on my mind a lot when I'm making decisions. And yes, there are some, you don't have to say yes to everything, and you don't have to say that you're going to commit or do every single thing that pops into your head. If I did that, I would have no time to do anything, because I have a brain that works 1,000,000 miles a minute, and I'm constantly thinking of new ideas. So if I said yes to every single thing that popped into my head, I would just not have time to do anything at all. But for me, when new things do pop into my head, digressing for a little bit, what I do is I actually run it through a filter of what's important to me, what, like, my hierarchy of importance and what means the most to me, and is this going to contribute to those things or not? And that helps me differentiate whether I say yes or no to certain things. But the thing that keeps playing on my mind, maybe it's because I'm getting a little bit older, and maybe it's because I've been coming across people who are in their later years of life, right? And you talk to them about certain things that maybe they put off or they didn't do. And there's always going to be something, I think, that we didn't do that we regret. And that is the thing, that is probably the biggest thing. Leaving things and not doing things financially will cost you. It will cost you with time. It will cost you with effort. It may cost you with health. But I think the biggest thing that people don't want is they don't want to get to the end of their life and regret not taking the step or not doing something, or I wish I had started training earlier, or I wish I had have gone and taken that trip. I wish I had have made that career move, because they just left it too long, and then by the time they were actually able to do something, life had passed them by and they weren't actually able to make the change they thought they were able to later on. So the longer you leave things, the more you're going to have to pay for it. It can be financially, it could be with your time, it could be with your effort, your energy, but it can also be with regret if you never get around to it. And everything goes up over time. So while this may seem like a little bit of a motivational speech, and I guess it is, and it's tailored towards me and things that I've been thinking about, but also some of the conversations I've been having over the last few months, you will go through times in life where you feel the urge to change your situation or your circumstances. And I'm not even talking about training, I'm just talking about life in general. If I look back, I've had probably 4 major shifts in my life since the age of 20. Some of those have been forced just through the circumstances I've been presented with, where I've had to make a hard change on something. Some of them have just been things where I've gone, you know what, I'm going to take the step and I'm going to take the leap. And now as I get older, even though I may have paid for them in some other ways, like financially and things like that, maybe I haven't made the money that I've wanted to, I look back and I go, at least I've gave that a good go. And I don't have to live with the regret of what if. I have to live with the regret on the other side of what if I didn't make that decision or take that step, but I'm okay with that because I actually did what I was drawn to do and I felt like I wanted to do. And I've been through, I'd say, if I'm looking back, I'd say maybe 4 major shifts. And I kind of jumped all in on all of them, and I'm glad that I did, because one of the things that I've really been thinking about is I don't want to get to the end of my time where I'm not able to make any of those decisions anymore and have to live with the regret of not doing it, or knowing that the reason I didn't do it was just a bullshit excuse. Because a lot of the times the fear that we put up in front of ourselves about actually taking the step and moving to that next phase of our life is just fear-based parameters that we've set for ourselves. The constructs within that are just not real. It's not a real reason to be fearful of taking that step. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But once we start taking that step, and it may not work out, sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But for me personally, I'd prefer it not to work out and be able to look back and go, you know what, I'm really glad I did that, because I can get to my later years and get to my deathbed and go, yep, I did that and I'm glad I did it and it didn't work out, but at least I know that it didn't work out, because everything's going to go up over time. The level of regret you're going to feel for not taking that step or not making that decision, that's going to go up over time, because there's going to come a time where your circumstances aren't going to allow you to take that step. And time is going to run out. It's always undefeated. It's the one resource that is not renewable or that we can't make more of. So stop leaving things, take the step, take the plunge. That concludes my motivational speech for the week. So let me know what you think. Are there things that you've put up which are, the reason you've done it is because you're scared of what could potentially happen? And are those fears warranted? Because sometimes they are warranted, and sometimes maybe it's not a smart move. But a lot of the times what I've noticed is the smart moves and are generally not the moves that our heart and our soul want us to make. Right, like leaning into where we want to go, where we're being pulled to go, is generally not going to feel like the smart move. And sometimes we just need to take that step, and then we need to work our ass off to make sure that we're able to make it work, or were able to make a go of it and know categorically by the end of it, if it didn't work out, at least you've given it a good go. And who knows, maybe it does work out and maybe you get to where you want to go in the end. So don't wait. The longer you leave it, the more it's going to cost you, the more you're going to pay for it across all areas and all aspects of your life. Take care. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.